Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Conic Living Show number 146 for October 23rd, 2023. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Boy, we're getting a lot of white balance issue here today. We'll see if we can fix that between shows. We're not gonna screw with it tonight. In any case, we are clipping Osmani Harbi, the Ottoman Front from the Der Weltkrieg series, which I was clipping on here some months ago, and I set it aside, and we're going to try and make some more progress on it this evening, and we are drinking the fabulous Balvenie 12 Doublewood. Yeah, white balance is not great here tonight. Sorry about that. This is bottled at 43%, and it has both American white oak and Spanish sherry oak age in it, and it's very good. So that is I don't. That's a problem. I didn't get a haircut. I'm having a bad hair day. So yeah, everybody loves Balvenie, man. Nobody has a problem with that. Beyond that, our topic is big games versus little games. Why do we like big games? Why do we like little? Whoops, we were screwing this up. Why do we like little games, or both, or what? And what are some strategies to handling that? White skin and black t-shirt, Meandering Mike says, causes some contrast adjustment. That's actually likely. I actually haven't been wearing a black t-shirt, and I am not going to go change my t-shirt on camera because nobody wants to see that. You will all call the authorities if I take my shirt off on camera. Besides, there's gamers that do that. It's friggin' weird. So, before we get started, I would like to remind everybody to please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed through some unhappy mischance. Super chats and super stickers are active. It's a good way to get your comment highlighted. And if I don't get to you instantly, if you super chat or super sticker, I will get to you sooner or later because we're going to try and be methodical in the chat. So, and the link is active, and this reminds me to turn on the ticker. Link in the ticker to the Ardwulf's Lair Discord community. So check that out as well if you are on Discord. Big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whose support and encouragement it would not be possible to continue doing this kind of thing. So thank you, patrons. There'll be a thing at the end. Otherwise, I'm not going to mention it again. So before we actually get into the top, well, actually, let's do this first. Let's first of all say hello to Big Terp, Bill Simone, Board Gaming Geezer, Brent McCabe, Brian Jarvis, Brian Gash, Chad Kennedy, Christopher Smith, Clark Commando 1983. Mark, good to see you here. Krusty Captain, Daniel Brown, Daniel Silverthorne, David Imperato, David Zell, Ed Holtzman, Eggrut, Henry Sikorsky, Iggy Cricktal, the legend himself, Fucko is here. Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Wesovich, Joe Faust from reasonably nice northeastern Ohio today, and John C., of course, from the sunny Philippines. John Clark, Jonathan Dyer, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp, Kevin Paulson, Kyle Harris, Lee Grant, Mark McNair, Matt Davidson, Matt Taylor, Meandering Mike, Nordic Maelstrom, Palmer Eldridge, Panzer Division, Lair, Perry Sparopoulos, Robert Phillips, Stacking Limit is here, Stigler is in the house, Todd Cox, Todd Walser, Vicky, welcome back to the show, Vince Marie, William Bird, and Winterson. So everybody, welcome. Also, let's find that. I can't find it. Hell, it's okay. But welcome everybody. If you have not been to the show before, so. Much appreciated. Winterson is working on his Harn game, which is a fantastic idea. At some point, we are clipping Osmani Harbi, the Ottoman Front, 1914 to 1917, 18, in this case. So we're not going to fit. This is like 4 counter sheets. We're not going to finish this tonight. So a whole bunch of interesting things going on. We are going to start this evening with the GMT update, which came out last week. So as usual, let me zoom in just a wee bit more. As usual, if you want to read the entire update, please go check it out on GMT's website. I am just going to hit the highlights with a special focus on things I found interesting and or the production schedule and or new P500s or, big news. So, news from Gene. This is a rundown of the recent weekend at the warehouse. There's some pictures here. 125 people showed up, about 125 people anyway. Mark Ruggiero was there. Mark gets a shout out here. For those who don't know, Mark's situation, there is a link to the GoFundMe for Mark and his wife, both of whom are battling cancer, down in the video description. So please do check that out. Some folks showed up at that event to support Mark, and here's Mark playing Third World War. Hopefully that went well. And here's Mark again with Tim, whoever Tim is. So what's shipping? They're nearly finished with all the P500 shipments that began shipping on October 3rd. That is Downfall, plus the mounted map stuff for Downfall, plus the new printing of Great Battles of Alexander, the Macedonian Art of War, the second printing of Tyrant, and the Sovereign of Discord, the expansion, latest expansion for Fire in the Lake. Well, we'll get to all that stuff later on. The GMT fall sale news will start November 13th at 5 a.m. Pacific time. So at that time, if you would like to go visit the GMT website, our thoughts and prayers will be with you. So I did not pre-order a copy of Downfall, but I have made an arrangement to procure a copy, an ironclad arrangement. So I will be getting it at some point. For those who want video on it immediately, Nate over at Wise Guy History is doing video on it. So check that out. And he has a couple on there already. John, we are explicitly going to talk about this actually when we get to the topic. So they get to play Firefight Tactical with the designer. P500 orders have increased over the last few days. Good for them. Let's see what else is here. A box back, a guest of Robin Hood. The box back looks good. The map looks good. The front looks good. Everything looks good about this. Looks like they're tarot-sized cards, which I'm not crazy about just for the hassle of sleeving them, but you can get sleeves for those kind of cards nowadays. And maybe this actually includes sleeves, because some games actually include sleeves for that. And there's only 44 cards, so that's not that many. All right, so development update with Jason Carr. He is continuing to work on Twilight Struggle South Asian Monsoon, which actually does sound fairly neat. Check out our interview that we did with Jason about Twilight Struggle South Asian Monsoon. They're doing some interesting things there. And we will also be talking about, how to approach big games. And Vassel is a key component of that, in my opinion. For those who don't have the physical space or necessarily the contiguous time to deal with it. We'll talk about that. All right. What's coming up? New Vassel modules or updated Vassel modules for a bunch of stuff. And Stigler pointed out on Facebook somewhere that there's an update to the Vassel module for 3 Days at Gettysburg as well. That probably didn't make this update. There are some updates on Frank Chadwick's ETO, so check that out. It's actually from Frank this time, so that's cool. Here's a look at the new printing of, or the map from the new map from the new printing of Mark Herman's Timeless Classic for the People. I actually busted this out a few days ago and just played a couple of turns of it because I wanted to refresh my memory as to how it worked for reasons we might talk about at some point or another. This is a map by Terry Leeds, and it might not be super duper obvious, but I feel like it's clear. I think the state borders are clear. I think the text is the named spaces are clearer. I think this is an improvement over the old board, and the old board wasn't bad at all. So it looks great, and I have ordered this along with the 3-inch box because even though my stuff all fits in a 2-inch box, it's bulging just a little bit. As when the time came to put that away, I actually put it away in 3D printed counter trays. So it is well organized now. All right. Interviews all over the place. El Wargamero Novato, which is a fabulous name. If I haven't said that before, has a couple. Players 8 has one. Me and Dan had David Thompson on. He's got something coming from GMT as well as everybody else. Candace Harris had Harold Buchanan on, and ID Jester had Herman Lutman on. So check those out. A bunch of different links to a bunch of different things that they're talking about. So here's what's new, and I haven't actually pulled this up or added to P500. One is a second printing of Panzer Expansion number 4. I don't know that I need to really say anything about that. It's Panzer expansion number 4. Fans of Panzer will definitely want it. We do have Solitaire, Tac Ops, Ortona, and the Battle for Sicily. So let's take a look at this Solitaire, Tac Ops, Ortona. And this is designed by Non-Breaking Space, whoever that is. And there's not a whole lot here, but it's the Battle for Ortona, which is in Italy in 1943. Is it in Sicily? No, it is in Sicily, actually. So that can't be in Sicily. That's bullshit. Because it's December 1943. But in any case, it's the Italian campaign. And I don't know. There's not a whole lot of information on here, but it is a hex encounter game, and obviously this is playtest art. Please note that these are prototype images, not final art. Stigler. Well, I'm not going to claim that the Panzer map art is anything fancy. I don't think it's the abomination Stigler seems to feel that it is. And as Andrew Cook points out, Non-Breaking Space also did or is working on, I don't know if it's done, Cross Bronx Expressway. Marty has high regard for Downfall because he helped play test it. So that's one of those games where maybe it's falling into the fairly large gray area between little games and big games, right? And how it exactly falls depends on your definition of those terms. So, all right. So next up is not exactly new, but returning to P500. And there's a little statement about this in the text where they didn't actually pull it down. They just kind of pulled it backstage. And the Battle for Sicily is back. This is a Dan Holt design on 4 maps, or is it 5 maps? 4 maps and 5 counter sheets on the Sicilian campaign. It's a topic of particular interest to me. So I've been looking forward to this. I had this on P500 before, and then they removed it from P500. So then I didn't. I have, however, re-upped on this. So this is using the same Dan Holt system as the Battle for Normandy with some changes to reflect the differences in the 2 campaigns, like the fact that there's an actual contested air war at this point, really less so in June of 44. So I've been excited about this for a long time. So very much looking forward to seeing this. Apparently it's done. It's just ready to push through their whatever process GMT has. So so anyway, so yeah, I've totally pushed the button on this. $82 for 4 maps and 5 counter sheets doesn't sound bad to me at all. That's, I think, more reflective of modern materials costs than it would have before. But you also get 2 books, 2 laminated air allocation charts. I didn't notice that before, and there's some beach overlays, which you'd think there might be. Although in Battle for Normandy, those are just on the map, so there's that. So yeah, looking forward to this 3-inch box. God, I hope so. That said, 5 counter sheets and 4 maps, I can get that in 3 counter trays, 3 GMT counter trays, no problem. And Battle for Normandy did not sort particularly inefficiently. So yeah, this is pretty big. Does it say what the actual hex scale is? I can tell you that it's probably something like a mile or a mile and a half per hex. And I am saying that basically solely based on the fact that that's what the scale is for the Battle for Normandy. And the 2 maps, Sicily, Triumph, and Folly, is 2.5 miles per hex. So 4 maps for Sicily at 1 mile per hex sounds approximately correct. So, so anyway, back to the main update. So Battle for Sicily, get it while it's hot. Has it already made its number? Yes, indeed it has. But it inherited some number too. So I noticed that sometimes when they pull something from P500, they will not really remove it from their system, and your order will still be floating about in the background. So I tend to cancel those when that happened, and I did for Battle for Sicily, and I've re-upped on that. Did I just screw? No, good. Okay. All right. So back to this recent P500 editions. We've talked about all this stuff. My big things that I'm super excited about here are 3 Days of Gettysburg Deluxe, Thunderbolt, um, 1848. I'm also very much looking forward to as well, of the things that are right here. And Epipoli is Living Campaign Ancients. That actually looks pretty interesting as well. So here's the discussion of the stuff that they've added. Right, new P500s on the horizon. I've got at one point, Eric Goebel, I had like 12 different games on the campaign for Sicily. I since unloaded a few of them, so I don't have all of those anymore, but I still have quite a few. So, including some turds. So that Italian campaign Sicily that came out in S&T many years ago, that's got potential, but it needs some work. That whole series. 1848 is not an 18xx game. It is a political game on the revolutions of 1848. That's super duper interesting. So I'm very much looking forward to that. John Z, thanks for stopping by. We'll catch you later on the flip side. So I have a high opinion of the Sicily race for Messina, but I mean it does suffer from the limitations of its format, right? So let's be clear about what it is. This is going to did that have, I don't know what the exact unit scale is, but it could be battalions. It even could be companies at that scale. So Mark has mentioned that he is having a war game garage sale on 11/11. So details on Facebook. So check that out over on Facebook. I hope we are all following Mark on Facebook at this time. All right, so brief tease for P500 edition. It's a fast-playing American Revolution area control strategic game. Now, I mean, that could be anything, right? I mean, that description fits Washington's War. A World War One economic competition game. That is also vague, but potentially interesting. A contemporary operational level war game from Mark Herman and David Doctor. That's going to be the game on Kiev, in the current Ukraine war. So that is of interest because of the designer pedigree there, in my opinion. Mark is a designer that I trust to handle a topic like this with the proper degree of skill and experience. And if it was somebody else, I would be very reluctant to even take a look at a game on a topic that recent, just because of the paucity of sources, right? And a new Men of Iron series game. Crystal clear on that. That is fabulous, fabulous news. So this is absolutely true that there are of the Victory in the West games, and I'm talking the Victory in the West games proper, the three that were released at S&T. The Sicily race for Messina has by far the most special rules, but I mean that's kind of to be expected too, right? Um, we were talking about Battle for Normandy for Winterfest in February, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think that is an assumption based on the assumption that it was going to be out by February, and that ain't happening. So if it is not at the printer now, it's not going to be out for February. So Chad Kennedy enjoyed Battle for Normandy, and Perfidious Albion says it's a most playable Normandy monster out there. And I did do some playthrough video of this, so it's not really playthrough. It's more after action reports and turn reports. So check those out. But it is a very solid game. I don't think it's completely without issues, but some of those issues are issues of preference, like mandatory attacks. Now, having dealt with the mandatory attacks in, say, Russian campaign recently, I find the mandatory attacks and the way they work in Battle for Normandy to be significantly more palatable. Let me put it that way. And the attacks aren't mandatory unless you are yourself attacking, and then every adjacent unit has to be attacked, but there are terrain-based exceptions to that as well. A very solid game. I think I'm very interested in the new edition of that, which I have also ordered. So whatever Mr. Dan wants to do, now that he's not getting shot at anymore, in that series, if we're going to call it a series, I will be definitely looking at and interested in coming events. Spring 24 weekend at the warehouse. There's dates for that, and that is okay. There's not dates for that yet. They're working on dates for that. Bathos Con 2023 in British Columbia. 16th annual gaming convention for all war gamers. This sounds like a cool event. SD HistCon is coming up next week. I think it starts next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend. So it's actually the week ahead of Veterans Day weekend this particular year. So this is a dynamite event as far as I could tell, and I wish I was going, but I can't because there's no money. So here's a video by designer Jason Walanowski on Epipoli, and these are going to be playtest components, but they still look pretty decent for playtest components. All right, here's the GMT final 2023 replacement counter sheet with all the stuff. So just to kind of cover what we got in here, there should be a list. All right, Barbarossa Army Group Center. Great Battles of Julius Caesar Deluxe, Flying Colors, Under the Southern Cross, Pacific War, Seas of Thunder, Musket and Pike Dual Pack, Next War Poland, Next War Supplement, Vietnam 65 to 75, Clash of Sovereigns, Fields of Fire Volume 2, Mr. President, Border Reavers, and Stalingrad 42. The only games in this entire list that I don't have are Seas of Thunder, Clash of Sovereigns, and Border Reavers, and Fields of Fire Volume 2. I have Volume 1, I think, still somewhere. All right, so it's at the printer. This will probably be out by the end of the year because they're kind of feels like they're rushing this. All right, Rally of the Troops continues to get rave reviews by those people who have played it, so check that out. There's a whole bunch of games on there as well. They're not all from GMT as well. I completely agree that blank counters on counter sheets are, well, maybe I've got a jar. I don't know where the hell it is, but I've got a big mason jar of old blank counters, just to be safe if I need to make some replacement counters. So part of the reason why Battle for Sicily got delayed is because Dan was active duty military and was actually over in parts unknown being shot at. So an understandable cause of delay. And I'm glad that Battle for Sicily has returned. And I believe he is done with that now, I think. So, all right. Another video. I think we've seen this Plantagenet video a million times, and I will not be accepting questions on pronunciation this week. We've already covered that. There's the GMT Discord server. Am I on the GMT Discord server? Maybe. I don't know. Bob Kowalczyk, thank you so much for the support. Small game? Well, actually, there's one on the table behind me right now that you cannot see. It is Frederick the Great. That is what I would consider a small game. But we'll talk about the definitions of those things and how we figure those out. And I'm not going to propose that my definitions are necessarily need to be everybody's definitions. Everybody's got to make that decision for themselves, right? But we'll get to that. So, all right. So what else do we got here? A bunch of additional stuff for a bunch of additional games. Not there yet. Orders. What do we got here that I thought was interesting? Epipoli is on here, but frankly, Epipoli is going to make its number no problem, because it just popped up here. Napoleon in Egypt looks interesting. I'm kind of mystified why that doesn't have its number yet. Borican looks very interesting. And I think Firefight Tactical just popped up like last month or the month before too. So that those are on here tells you pretty much nothing. No, not that. Dan Holt, the designer of Battle for Normandy and Battle for Sicily. All right, digital games updates on this stuff. Do I have all of these? I don't have Tried Struggle Red Sea, but I got the other three, and they're all very good adaptations. So here's Saverio Spanoli. With Grant and Alexander on Vagina Guard. That looks interesting as well. Inside GMT. This is all their like support articles that they've been doing. So Tony Mammal, thanks for stopping by. And Todd Cox is looking forward to Red Winter. Yeah, it ain't really languishing though, is it? It hasn't been up that long, as I recall. All right. Most requested P500 games: Red Dust Rebellion. Away Team. I haven't ordered that. I need to get off my ass and order that. Space Empire is All Good Things. That's on order. 3 Days of Gettysburg is on order. Weimar Republic. They're probably going to show off the cover for Weimar Republic. It's very nice. And Grand Battles for Commands and Colors Napoleonics. I got that on order. Norman Conquest I got on order, a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm looking forward to a pile of these. All right, so shipping now includes the stuff that we talked about up top. Downfall, the mounted maps in the big box, Great Battles of Alexander, new printing, Great Battles of Alexander, the Tyrant expansion, part 2, and Sovereign of Discord. Next charges and shipments will be CNC Napoleonics, Generals, Marshals, and Tacticians reprint, CNC Samurai Battles second printing, Prime Minister, which actually looks fairly nice and interesting as well, although I did not personally order it. Last 100 yards of the Russian front. For those who were in the I almost said last Russian front, last 100 yards. Um, well, so part of it's that Stigler, and part of it's John Butterfield on away team. All Good Things has been up for pre-order forever, so I see people playing Tank. Oh, piss! I see people playing Tank Duel at conventions, so I assume that it is a popular affair. Yeah, I'll figure it out later. Just drop some counters. Oh well. All right, and these things are going to get charged on October 23rd, which is today. So you probably already got charged. And in fact, Rob Johnson said they got charged. Nordic Maelstrom would like a reprint of Hoplite and Chariots of Fire. I completely agree with that. All right, production outlook. In addition to the stuff we have already mentioned, we have Banish All Their Fears, CNC Medieval second printing, and Epic Napoleonics second printing. That's not the Grand Battles. I don't have that on order. I have the Grand Battles on order. Norman Conquest's Men of Iron Volume 5 I have on order, however. That looks good. No ship date yet, but 2023 replacement counters, Pans on North Africa, Tanto Manta, Plum Island Horror, and Vijaya Nagara are all at the printer. Now, going to the printer late this month or early next month. So in the next couple of weeks, a Guest of Robin Hood, Rebel Fury, which I do have on order now, thank goodness, for the people, fourth printing. And what I've ordered is the mounted map in a 3-inch box. Now, mine has a mounted map, but I guess I'll recycle it. Because I like the new one, and I certainly would like the 3-inch box better. All right, so in final art and proofing, we're not going to go through all of these, but Wolfpack has moved up. You can imagine what that's about. I haven't played Last 100 Yards either, but it is getting really. It's not that it's getting really strong reviews. It's getting good. There are specific things about it that are being said that I find very appealing. In the art department, nothing has moved up. Nearing art department readiness, nothing has moved up. So we don't have a lot of news over there. We do have the chit show with the logo, which I've designed actually. Dan usually does that stuff, but this one was mine. And I didn't have any GMT stuff this month. Anyway, so here's the box cover for the let me zoom out now. For the Weimar Republic. Weimar. I think it's a very strong cover. This will stand out on a shelf. I have no idea on this. I don't have either of those, so I did not investigate whether this would be the case or not. I mean, I don't know what art department means, man. In some of these cases, the art's done. So I don't know that that's art per se, but it's kind of generally descriptive of where it is in the process. Here is the box cover for Ted Racer's I, Napoleon, which is another, I think, pretty strong cover that doesn't look, oh God. Yeah, Last 100 Yards is easier to learn in ASL, but I think this is a pretty strong cover. I don't know if it's a period painting or not. It looks contemporary it looks modern to me. Let me put it that way. Here's the Guest of Robin Hood cover. Let me know if I'm mispronouncing that, but I don't know. Fred's going to have to remind me of how you're supposed to pronounce that. But I think this is it's a very fantasy-esque cover. But given the topic, I don't think that's really a problem. I mean, after all, in some adaptations of Robin Hood, we do have witches, stuff like that. So here's a strategic map for Next War Taiwan 2nd edition. I don't think I need that. It says game map for I Napoleon, but it's really more of a display. Here's some cards for I Napoleon. These look good. Some counters, some charts and tables for Wolfpack, some stuff from Fields of Fire. They're playtesting Volume 3, Panzer North Africa. Joe Dewhurst has some production updates and reprint tracking. You can, this is just numbers that I'm not going to crunch live on camera here. Yeah, so I mean, yes, this is true, I suppose, but it does feel like an art department is kind of a catch-all, right? Where it might not be art per se, it might be late in the fine tuning stages. Um, mm, Jeff Taylor, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Says that Last 100 Yards is the BCS of tactical games, different enough from everything else to be worth a look. Yeah, and that's kind of what's interesting to it to me. Um, Mastery of chapters A through D. This by itself is like 160 pages, though. But it's also a bit of an oversimplification too. You don't need to absolutely memorize everything in those chapters. A lot of it's situational. So, is that available for pre-order? Now I'll have to check this out. I'm probably gonna. Well, I'm gonna get this, which probably means I'll pre-order it. But I don't imagine it'll be out by Christmas, so I'll probably wait until next year to do that. I've still got to get the new OSG thing on order as well. I'm late to the party on that, but that is going to be a must buy. Meandering Mike says geste, which I find completely believable since I assume it to be French. So Todd Cox is hitting every ASL rule in red factories, but I'm not shocked by that either, because that is the deep end of the ASL pool, right? And we could use some fresh ideas in the very crowded space of squad and or platoon level World War II tactical games. All right, so short channel. Let me get rid of this. Will that make that go away? It did. Cool. Let me pull up another thing here because I can't do two of these at the same time. So upcoming stuff. No video tomorrow. On Wednesday, you will see this Wargames Unearthed the Russian campaign. I did it in a different style than the first one, and then the third one will be in another different style than the first one. So I kind of want feedback on that. So make sure to let me know when this video comes out. It's about 10 minutes long, which is the time target for this. This is been added to the queue as I realized that I have already done a video on Fire in the East. So we will not be doing another one unless I have something new to say, which may not happen. So instead, we will be adding Terrible Swift Sword to the queue. And this has been enabled by this purchase. Now, this was local by fella's got like an entire warehouse worth of stuff in his living room and his pantry and his porch and his foyer and his bedrooms and everything. I'm very happy with the deal. Unfortunately, upon arrival at home, I found that the Conquerors is missing all of the Greeks. So we're working on a solution for that, and I'm sure we'll work it out. But everything else looks fine. In fact, the only thing here that was punched was the Conquerors. Everything else is unpunched. So OST is generally people are referring to old school tactical from Flying Pig. I do like to make these title graphics, and frankly, I have. Well, hell, you want to see them all again? Because I can show them all to you again. That's no problem. I just got to pull it up. Got to remember where the hell it is, because there are some additions to the queue. Now, I'm actually I've assuming I can like make the schedule. I may be doing one of these approximately every 2 weeks. Just because that's what it's working out to be, and I've done very well so far with kind of maintaining a tempo as far as making these things go. Now they're not necessarily incredibly high effort to make those videos in comparison to like an actual playthrough. Yeah, so there's 3 full-size SPI counter sheets in there. There's 2 Roman sheets for the Romans part of it, and 1 Greeks, which is Greeks and Persians, obviously. Yeah, well, it's still about Stigler. It's still about 6 months, but it's also I believe I'm going to accelerate the schedule just a wee bit on that. Assuming again, assuming I can maintain the tempo. All right. So next war we've seen. The next one up after Russian campaign will be Frederick the Great. This is on the table right now. It's really interesting design. Actually. Oh, laptop not letting Charles Latour chat. That's not cool. So back to the phone. I have no idea. All right. Well, if it's English, it's old English. So or older English, as it were. A lot of things we say today. Oh, that's old English. Are in fact not old English at all. They're early modern English or Middle English. All right, war between the states. Still waiting for this to show up. I'm starting to fear that the nice folks at the post office may have misplaced it. The Civil War from Victory Games and Eric Lee Smith. That's a classic. Russian campaign. You'll see that on Wednesday. Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I'm not sure if I had this on here before, but we're going to talk about this as well. La Grande Armée, we've definitely mentioned. Victory in the West. Sicily, as Stigler's one of Stigler's favorites. Garrett Goebel mentions that local place has water damage copy for Bloody April. Wanted $85 for it. No, I wouldn't do that either. At one point, it felt like Bloody April was the easiest of the SPI soapboxes to get, and by easiest in this context, I mean cheapest. I think it's actually gone up a bit, but and I think Art of Siege has gone down. Interesting. And of course, Campaign for North Africa has gone way, way, way up. So, what are you going to do about that? But I think $85 is too much for a shitty copy. I got mine for 80 and it's unpunched. So, Panzer Group of Guderian will be along at some point. Operation Typhoon will be along at some point. We're going to do P Ridge. What we're probably going to do more than this because we're probably going to like link multiple ones of these together in sort of a series within the series type of thing. And Terrible Swift Sword and the Conquerors, if I can get it to work, and the Sword and the Stars, which is interesting. And if I can get an SPI copy of Empires of the Middle Ages, I might do that as well. But I don't have that yet. So, in any case, so early modern English is the English of the Elizabethan era. It is Shakespeare's English. Which is neither middle nor old English. And I'm not accusing anyone here tonight of making that error, but it's an error you hear a lot, usually from people in high school. So I got charged for Axis Empires today. So that will be on its way, and I'm very excited about that. We will have assuming I get the editing done, we will have an unboxing video on Thursday as well. Not of that, but I mean, I don't think so. That'd be nice. I mean, in terms of play, I'm going to agree with Stigler that I think Into the Woods is the better game for me, but I also concede that there are reasons to prefer the older iteration of the rules. So, the rule is that it's got to be 40 years old. Now, if I got a newer version than that, but it's still close to the 40-year-old version, then I might, I might squeeze, but that is basically what it is. So like the phase of English that's before the Shakespearean English is Middle English. Compare Shakespeare and Chaucer. I do not have a copy of Gettysburg 77, and I guess the good news on that is it's not a particularly expensive buy if you want to run down a copy. So that may be, but as it is, I've got like 14 things in the queue, so I'm not in a rush to pick up any additional stuff. And I'm kind of waiting for War Between the States to show up because um, I'm actually super interested in talking about that because I think that game has a number of very interesting features. And I reserve the right to change my mind on some of these things too. So I took a peek at La Grande Armée as well, and I'm not 100% convinced that that is interesting looking at it. I'm gonna do something with it and figure it out, but it's extremely straightforward. But then again, Frederick the Great is extremely straightforward, and it's got some really revolutionary mechanics for 1975. So, well, we'll see. I bought it more as a study piece than as a play piece. If I'm going to play Shiloh, I'm probably going to play the new one, bluntly. So, all right. So, big versus little games. So, and Mike M says it's pronounced jest as opposed to jest. Um, I mean, if it was sometimes the G is pronounced as a Y in Old English anyway. So, 1776. Is it the only hex map American Revolution strategic level game? I was actually looking to see if I can answer that very question recently, and I'm not sure that it is. Well, it's not. Let me put it that way, but it might be the best example at its scale. The End of Empire has American Revolution in it, remember, and it's a hex map. It's not going to be quite as good. So, Carl, I'm probably in the market for the decision version as well, which I had and stupidly got rid of. But that is not a particularly urgent thing, assuming the SPI version shows up. I think 1776 is a very strong game, and that's actually on the list that I haven't made title cards for. I mean, I do get excited about making the title cards, so so that's why. And of course, Alistair Logie cleans it up for absolutely everybody. I don't agree with this in terms of the couple of games that has been just mentioned in terms of War Between the States. It's virtually identical to the SPI version, except in terms of graphics, which is it's better. I think the big difference was that they took out the weird forest in the middle of Kansas. Um, there was a strategic S&T American Revolution game, which I believe was redone at least once, but it may not have been redone as a hex map. I'm not sure. Um, War for America is not a hex map, though. It's point to point. So that looks actually really interesting. Another thing I guess I'll mention that is kind of in the pipeline is that I'm working on the Ardwulf's Lair video where I show folks the game room and the office and all that stuff. And where that's at is cleaning the office up. The game room is basically set for now. I'm going to need to improve the table situation because the table situation is not viable as of this exact moment. But, um, isn't Nils in like freaking Sweden, however? So I'm keeping an eye on the Wargames European group. No, I'm not keeping an eye on that. Yeah, so that doesn't help me any. But hey, anybody that's interested in these SPI things, check out that Facebook group. I might getting thrown off of Facebook. I don't know. I'm not sure what game this is referring to. Oh, excellent. Tom MC has finally played the US Civil War. That is a terrific game. I think 1776 is I think American Revolution in general is an underrated topic in war games. I would like to see a good treatment of that. That's not a project I am going to undertake because I know jack and shit about the American Revolution. Washington, haha, Saratoga, haha, Yorktown. I mean, I'm I'm understating, for the sake of being funny, but I mean, it takes some knowledge to design a game on a topic, and I don't have that knowledge. So there's that. I don't think there's a definitive game on either of these topics, Nordic Maelstrom. Let me put it this way. I think different people will tell you different things. I think common choices for this will be things like Bitter Woods for the Bulge. Some people will say Bulge 65. I don't think that's definitive anymore, but I think it holds up pretty well. I think that for me, I think my definitive game on the Bulge is now Last Blitzkrieg. A lot of people like the original Ardennes. Ardennes 2 that just came out from MMP is being warmly received as well. So, Ardennes 44 is a very good game. There's at least one Bulge game that I think some people would pick on when asked that question. Um, I don't remember what that was. This is from the forgotten years when the magazine was being run by TSR, I believe. So that might be why the name does not ring a bell. Wasn't that a subtitle? I thought it was a subtitle and it was an actual title. Eh. It's really not. A lot of people say this, and it's really not. U.S. Civil War. One of the reasons I sat down with For the People is kind of to refresh my memory as to how it plays, and I'll do the same thing with Victory Game Civil War, and the same thing with U.S. Civil War. U.S. Civil War resembles For the People really just as much as it resembles the Victory Game Civil War. Now, admittedly, I think the Victory Game Civil War was an influence on For the People, but yes, we are. I'm not a big fan. I've only had the Dalmore 12, and while it wasn't bad by any means, I was not crazy about it. So, I think this is a bit of a this is the snob's choice of Normandy games, because only the snob will pay what these cost nowadays. Nordic Maelstrom on the topic of Time for Trumpets. I had it and I thought that the rulebook presentation was poor, and so it went away. It's got some really good ideas in it. I don't appreciate the pedagogical technique of saying, in order to learn this game, don't read these rules. Go buy this other game that isn't even available, and learn to play that, and then come back here. I think that's a bad pedagogical technique. I don't know that the book says that, but that's kind of what you should do with Time for Trumpets. If you know how to play Bitter Woods, you'll be able to jump into Time for Trumpets without too much trouble. I have not played Bitter Woods. My definitive Normandy game, I'm going to take the snob choice here and say the Goss Atlantic Wall. And I got to tell you that that is on the list of things I might do a video on as well. So, all right. So William Aaron's envies my freedom of the basement. Yeah, I pretty much have the whole basement to myself. But my wife got the nice upstairs office, so there was a trade-off involved here. All right, Nordic Maelstrom bought his first two Simonich for 40. I was actually calling this the Simonich apostrophe series at one point. Nowadays, I think the best. I was calling it the Zockbond series until Simonich did a game with no Zocs, so that's unfortunate. Those are really good games. North Africa 41 is going to be the most different of them because it's got no Zockbonds, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and it maybe makes sense for the desert. So, well, Dudcock says no. I mean, if you got people to teach you, that's fine too. What I'm saying is, I think it's difficult to learn the game from the rule books as presented. This game is being redone by Compass and Danny Parker as Last Gamble or The Last Gamble. I'm gonna buy that. Very much looking forward to seeing that. That won't be out for this Compass Expo, however. I have not played this. Who's the developer on this? Because boy, the buck stops someplace else, I guess. I'm not crazy about that. Boy, that's going to be a project. So, I mean, this is a good segue into the topic, right? So, on the one hand, one can bust out the old SPI Normandy game that probably plays in an evening. Now, this is a very early SPI game, I think 71, 72, something like that. Or the Avalon Hill D-Day for that matter. These are not lengthy players. Oh, really? Well, no. Anyway, no comment. Oh, I mean, so actual difficulty or complexity is not the issue, the question. So, and I mean, I've played Vok dem Rhein, and I mean, it was a valuable experience. I enjoyed it. I'm glad we played it. I would, if you were to come to me today and say, "Hey, we're going to play a Bulge game tonight. What are we going to start?" I would pick Last Blitzkrieg. And there's nothing wrong with Bitter Woods either, frankly. So, so Kyle Harris. So this is going to be a major project, right? So here's a good kind of extreme example of, I mean, this isn't even a game, right? This is going to be 3 games put together, right? When we have Omaha out, and there are challenges to doing Omaha in that system, just because of the way the system works. Let me put it that way. But or you could choose to play something that you can play in an evening, right? So what do we consider a small game, right? I mean, my personal probably small game definition is probably a game that takes less than 4 to 5 hours to play, or 4 to 5 hours or less. So it can easily be played on a weeknight on the kitchen table, and then you could tear it down. Okay. The A lot of folks, a smaller percentage of war gamers, but a lot of folks is to say that a small game is something you could play in 30 minutes or less. And I strongly suspect that a game that I can play in 30 minutes or less is not going to be of interest to me. Okay. Um, not, and that sounds snobbish, but it's more absolute than it sounds, because I mean, there's certainly games you play. When we were playing Magic, it was typical for us to play in 15-20 minutes, right? This was Magic the Gathering back in the day, but so and that was fun, right? We had fun with it at the time. Would I choose to spend my time doing that particular thing now? No, but I'm a different kind of player now than I was back in whenever that was. So um I mean, Stigler is, as usual, putting this in very stark terms, and my tastes on this align fairly closely with Stigler's. I would prefer generally to play a bigger game, because I think it gives meat that you don't necessarily have. So I'm going to make an assumption. So here's the other thing, right? On that. So first of all, let me say, Chad Kennedy, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. I could really use it right now. Let me tell you. But so how do we define big games? Now, obviously there's kind of multiple dimensions to making what makes a game big, and we've talked about this before, right? You've got the space consideration, the time consideration are the big thing, and maybe the complexity consideration as well. Although I tend to think that's second. It's not secondary, but it's not directly relevant to size, because there are small, complicated games. So I mean, to me, what most defines a monster game is not necessarily the footprint, although they're correlated, and the footprint, the physical space that it takes up, is a factor. It's the time. It's the amount of time it takes to play. So when I see, and you can see, Guns of August, for example, which is a minimum 20-hour game, right? So that's a pretty big. It's one map. It's, I don't know, 800 counters or something like that. It's not enormous space wise, but it's going to take you somewhere between 20 and 50 hours to play, right? Now, when we talk about the truly humongous games, right, like your Death Ride Normandies, like your GTS all of D-Day, and somebody mentioned that only goes up to like the second week It gets the first 10 days or something like that of the campaign, something like that. It is a short game in terms of how much it covers, but it's like it's companies, so I'm not surprised by that. Here is where it usually is it's not viable to play these things physically, and you turn to Vassel to do it, right? And I know they set this thing up. I don't know about Death Ride Normandy, but they set Death Ride Curse Cup or one of the Death Ride games up at Concept World Expo every year, and it I feel like it's very impractical to play it physically. I think the smart way to play a game that big where I'm gonna have trouble reaching the middle of the table here, maybe think about doing that on Vassal. Now, as an experiment, I don't have a picture ready to go, um, so I can't show it to you. As an experiment, I pulled out War in Europe and laid the maps out on the 2.5 by 6 folding tables that I have in that room. So that particular map is game is 9 maps. Am I right about that? I think it's 9 maps. Yeah, it's 9 maps, and I am one table away from being able to fit everything but Spain. And with another identical 2.5 by 6 table, I could get Spain on there too, with a bunch of additional space for display or some additional space for displays. There's a decent display footprint to that as well. So it was just interesting because I'm like, it's kind of closer than I thought it was going to be to get in this thing to fit in this room, right? Which is not a target I necessarily had. Frankly, if I play War in Europe again, I'm going to play it on Vassal. It's just going to be easier. This is not necessarily true. Now, well, I mean, super duper short. Yeah, I would agree. So Jonathan Dyer says 1.5 to 2 hours, maybe 3 is a sweet spot, given weekday evenings are the only opportunity. So, I mean, if that's the time you got, that's the time you got, right? I'll end up saying this in the video too, but Frederick the Great, I think, fits really well. It's right in that I can play this a scenario of this in the evening. And I think it would definitely benefit from repeat play as well. This is a reasonable position to take, I think. Jeff Taylor says if he's going to take the time to play a giant Normandy campaign game, he'd like to go past June 14th. And I'm inclined to agree with that as well. And that is about a week. That's 8 days. So I'd be in. So my interest in the topic, I feel like the breakout is kind of a different topic than the landings and the initial beach assaults, and the establishment of the lodgment at Normandy. I feel like those are two separate but one after the other topics. Okay, so it doesn't bother me when a game only deals with one of those things. Atlantic, this Atlantic, damn it, this Atlantic wall here only covers through the end of June, which is not quite to the, I think, if I'm getting the chronology right, not getting the time quite to the breakout. So the Duck Overlord really likes Thunder in the East. Now that's a kind of, I think that's a bit of a middle road game. I think if everybody knows what they're doing, I think you could probably play Thunder in the East in a weekend. So when I tend to think of these things, I tend to say, we got small games that you can play in an evening. We got medium games that you can play in a weekend, and you got big games that is going to take longer than that, right? You're going to need to leave set up somewhere for an extended period. Okay. These are all very floaty boundaries. All right. So Marty would call OCS Burma a mini monster. Only 2 maps, much lower counter density, but it's still going to take a while. I mean, there's no the OCS Luzon game is going to be the closest thing OCS has to a really small war game footprint. I suspect that if I were playing, say, Fucko at Luzon, that we would handily finish that game in an evening, in no more than 4 hours. But then again, I think we could play, if we had an all-day session of Smolensk, I think we could probably get it done too. So stacking limit, conversely, yeah, you get used to this though, to be honest. You can always zoom out, right? Um and it does help to have a big monitor too. I mean, I will flatly say that having a big monitor is life changing for Vassal use. I mean, I'm pretty good with the stacks, but this is certainly a factor, right? Just the size of stacks alone doesn't make it a big game or not, right? You can have a big stack, and that might be all you have. Perfidious Albion found DAC to be anything but a monster. Is broken out into individual battles, which are all quite compact and very manageable. So, I mean, OCS is a game. Well, let's broaden this a little bit, right? One of the the things we can always do if we have a huge game that's just too big for us to deal with is play a scenario. Now, hopefully, there's small scenarios, but there's probably going to be less huge scenarios. Some games break up bigger than other games, right? A good example of a game that does not break well into scenarios is the U.S. Civil War. It is two mounted maps, two full-sized mounted maps, and you cannot break it into a one map scenario because of the way the core mechanic of the way activations works. So you can start later and get a shorter game that way, and that's fine. But playing Vassal on a laptop is something I would only do if I was traveling, say for work, and I was away from all the war games and I wanted a war game. That's the only scenario that would lead me to trying to play Vassal on a laptop, just because of screen size, right? So, on the other hand, maybe you can just use your hotel room's television as a monitor, which would be completely transformative. Um, so I mean, this is true. I would very, 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 very strongly recommend a surplus of monitor space, one way or the other, for Vassal play. Whether that means getting a second or even a third monitor, because you're going to be spreading stuff out all over the place. So strongly recommended. So I mean, yeah, it's the monitor size that would prevent me from doing that. But if I had another monitor to plug it into, then yeah, who cares? All right. So, okay. Beginner monsters. This right here is a topic we could spend a whole show on, frankly. What is a good beginner monster? Do you want beginner in terms of simple, or do you want beginner in terms of maybe not too big? Because if you want monster in terms of simple, not a bad choice is War in Europe. Now, there are impediments to War in Europe. It's enormous. There's actually quite a few scenarios in it, so you don't have to necessarily play the whole thing. But it's also kind of hard to find and kind of expensive. And then you got to be concerned about, hey, I just got a copy. Is it complete? I don't know. My War in Europe, you've heard the anecdote, went flying at one point. So I'm eventually going to have to take that apart and verify it again. So there's that. A lot of the bigger SPI games. So what I got here, Terrible Swift Sword's not a bad choice. And an advantage of Terrible Swift Sword is that you can acquire the less attractive, but still perfectly playable TSR version relatively inexpensively. Probably a great kind of all-around kit to warm yourself up to larger and larger games is GBACW Death Valley. Now, the complexity is fairly high in GBACW, but and you get used to it, right? In this case, fortunately, the counters that fell on the floor were in a baggie, so we're not totally fucked. Death Valley has scenarios that range from the very small to the decent sized. Third Winchester and Cedar Creek are both fairly deep, fairly big battles for that campaign anyway. Well, the biggest battles in that campaign, let me put it that way. But they're decent sized battles without being as big as Gettysburg or Antietam or Chickamauga. Interesting. But it gives you a venue through which to learn the system and get used to that, while at the same time giving you room to grow into larger battles using the same rules. All right. We Must Tell the Emperor. This is a States of Siege game. I forget who the designer is. Somebody sent me a copy, and it looks really neat, actually. It looks like a good example of a States of Siege, of a good application of the States of Siege concept. Let me put it that way. Um, Neil Bedke says this is what he did with The Longest Day. Played the scenarios, tell you about the current house 12 years ago, and the first game to set up to play was the full Longest Day. There you go. Right now, I am not the world's biggest advocate of Longest Day specifically, but that's just one person's opinion. So Holland 44 is a terrific game, but it's playable in a 6 to 8 hour session, in my experience. So we admittedly did not play it with noobs, but it's eminently playable. It also doesn't break well into scenarios. I mean, it breaks better than you might think into teams. 12 by 6 is very respectable. So the eventual plan, right? And this is now looking like a 2024 plan. The eventual plan is to build approximately 30-inch high or 36-inch high tables out of two basic materials like 2x4s and plywood and stuff like that. And those tables will be 4x6. There'll be two of them, which means that I can move them around in different configurations to get a 6x8 space or a 4x12 space. That gives me a lot of flexibility as far as layout goes. Now, the smarter move is to probably make them smaller than that, but making them smaller means more materials and more pain in the ass. So I'm probably going to go with the two 4x6 tables. So yeah, Paul. So I mean, let's be honest. There's issues with War in Europe too. It is not an airtight game. But it's it's kind of it's not really one of a kind experience, but it is a unique experience, if that makes any sense. There's very little in there's very little maybe that doesn't make any sense. So 4x6 it's gonna be tough, or well, 6 foot wide. It's gonna be tough to reach the middle, I gotta be honest. The larger SCS ones, yeah, but I see. I didn't take that question as necessarily asking for simple games, right? And I would consider all of the SCS games to be quite simple games. Probably the most complicated one in the whole series is the Day of Days, and that's one. It is a bigger one, but that's one that I didn't actively didn't like. So different people have different opinions on that. Unconditional surrender this is a great example actually of a game that does not take up a lot of space. It does not have big stacks. It does not, have that many counters. It's got a decent number of counters, don't get me wrong, but you don't necessarily have a lot of density on the map at any given time. But it takes about 50 hours to play a full game of unconditional surrender. So it is a good suggestion. The Vassel module was excellent, by the way. I've done some video on that as well. So I made a bunch of mistakes. Carl, thanks for stopping by. All right. SCS It Never Snows. Thanks, Carl, for stopping by. It Never Snows is controversial because of the march rules, the road movement rules that a lot of people don't like. I don't know about a lot of people, but some people at least noisily don't like them. I think the idea there is to force you to guard the crossroads, right? So Stalingrad 42 is kind of I think Mini Monster is a good description. I think it's to me, I'd put it just below Mini Monster. I guess if we call Mini Monster the weekend game, yeah, you could play this in a weekend. Marty mentions, and several other people have said this already, Steve Carey is the designer of We Must Tell the Emperor, and it looks actually very neat. Ugh. Nova Games. That Nova Games thing's not ringing a bell, but of course I've seen a Streets of Stalingrad has passed through my hands. It's really big. It's gonna take a long time to play. I feel like I would get a similar experience out of, say, Red Factories or Red whatever the hell the thing's called, Red Factories, versus Streets of Stalingrad. Now I know they're different scales and they're not directly comparable, but I feel like if I want to like go into that house to house grind, that I might as well go down to the squad level, right? All right, Eric Goebel is on game number 9 of 1815, Scum of the Earth. Got it down to 2.5 hours. There you go. That's a pretty well regarded game. So yes, so NES does plan to bring Killing Ground and Overlord back. I believe the talk was combined edition. But yeah, I would not expect this to be anytime soon. So miniature miniatures is a little different because they're easier to reach and there's fewer of them normally. So the big OCS Fest thing, that's about a 5 feet across map. 6 feet across is you're getting pretty hard to reach the middle. Kaiser Schlock 1918. This is not one that I've seen, so I cannot comment on it. So I will point out that the L2 Streets of Stalingrad is rescaled from the original. So you know what? Quality is job one over there at NES. They're getting it right. They're doing their best to get it right. That takes extra time. So I'll mention this too. Actually, um, if there is a perfect monster game size, this is it. Okay, a 4x6 table will accommodate with a little bit of breathing room. A 4 map game, provided those 4 maps are laid out in a rectangular way, right? And with no like weird, super extreme alignment, weirdness. So, I could fit Beyond the Rhine on this. I could fit Case Blue. No, I mean the Case Blue part of Case Blue and not the Enemy at the Gates part of Case Blue, but I could fit the Enemy at the Gates part of Case Blue on here too. And actually, that would fit better because I wouldn't have to worry about Crimea. So I mean, this is kind of where I would put it. Yes. That said, there's big and there's big, right? So another example that I'll use here is the campaign game for Napoleon's Last Gamble that we intend to actually start this week, which reminds me I better not forget the game because that would suck. But I expect that to take about 20 to 30 hours to play through that campaign. And I actually feel like that's high, but a couple of the players haven't played it before. I haven't played that much of it. So we're going to have to kind of figure it out, and it won't go super duper fast. We'll see. I mean, it might be more closer to 12 or 15. So that's kind of where, and that's kind of right on the cusp of is it going to fall into mid-size or is it going to fall into big? A ping pong table. Is a ping pong table 4x8? I feel like it's a little bigger than that. So, the GMT's got stuff that's been on pre-order on P500 for over 10 years. I can tell you that. Those Barbarossa Army Group North and South are over that, if I'm not mistaken. So, it does happen, but on the other hand, if it's been sitting around for 10 years, maybe it's vaporware, right? And I don't think that's the case there. And I don't think that's the case in the other example I can think of, which is probably the reprint of the Devil's Cauldron from MMP, which is going to be a marvelous game. But Meandering Mike says 9x5 is the standard ping pong size. Pretty close. If I could get one more, well, I'm ignoring display space in this calculation, but if I could get one more of those 2.5x6 folding tables, I could fit War in the Pacific, which is 7 maps, I think. Well, it's 7 maps, but I think I could fit it. But That's another very, very, very display heavy game. So there's that. Now what I bought four charts for like displays and stuff. And I realize it's not quite perfect, but it's what I bought. I like to keep those on. It's just a separate table on the side, and I've got 5 tables in that room. 6 folding tables in that room of different sizes. I've got 2 that allegedly match, but they in fact don't. They're slightly different heights, which is a problem. They're not. It's not that they're different heights. It's that there are those tables that fold in half, and the one doesn't. The one has a little peak, and the other one doesn't. They both came from Costco, and I ought to take one of them back, or buy another one, make sure that it fits, and then take one of them back. Um, so, but I've got a number of other tables at slightly different heights. So you can't just line them all up. But then I also bought an 18-inch, 6 feet by 18-inch table. It's like a buffet side table. It's also just a folding table with a plastic top. And it's perfect to kind of sit against the wall adjacent to the main table and can hold charts or displays or whatever. So yeah, I mean the ultimate tables are going to be tables I build, but like I said, that's probably a 2024 project at this point. There's reasons to prefer folding tables, right? You could take them down if you don't need them. You want to make the room for something else. You could carry them around relatively easily. They're relatively modular, especially if you get smaller ones. They can also be fairly wobbly, where I imagine that the that I will construct out of 2x4s and plywood will not be wobbly. This is a great. So I'll point this out too. So IKEA, I want to say this is the Linman IKEA. This table here, and it is almost exactly by maybe an inch or 2 in any dimension, the same size as a standard sized war game map. I believe it is 24 inches wide and roughly 36 inches long. And last I checked, they were about $20. Now that's the top. You got to buy the legs, but the legs were also relatively inexpensive. So I have seen folks buy like 6 of these and end up with a very configurable layout. That said, this is against the wall, so it's not that wobbly. That said, they're a little wobbly. So that's an issue. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Mo, thanks for stopping by. Eric Goba built an overlay to turn his 4x6 table into a 5x8 table. Now that's something I'm thinking about, but if at that point where I'm going to like build an overlay, why don't I just buy 2 more 2x4s and put legs on it, right? So yeah, the configurability is nice with folding tables, assuming you've got folding tables that are all the same height. And the higher ones, well, Jeff is super tall, but the higher is a good idea here. Maybe not. What is bar height? Is that about 36 inches? Because that's my thought. That's so the tables that they built at Winterfest. Let me rephrase that because I got dimensions on them, but I forgot. I don't remember where I wrote those down. Tony Burkett's custom tables that he had built for him are 1 meter tall. Now, as I recall, that's about 38 inches, something like that, 39 inches. So they're fairly tall. And Tony is not 6'4". So I'm not going to make Tony mad by telling you what his actual height is. And I didn't take a tape measure to him, but he is not 6'4". So, so if Tony works at a meter, I'm figuring roughly that in, whatever that turns into inches, that's fine by me. I saw this. I am convinced that I'll lean on that and flip it over. So I could be wrong. The maps don't just line up in Storm of Steel or Balance of Powers. Those are both. Well, I haven't played Storm of Steel. It looks like it's got a lot of promise. That's why I bought it again. But Balance of Powers I have played, and it's pretty good. There's a lot of people that all of its significant problems are presentational problems. Let me put it that way. Or its most significant problems. Problems with contrast on the map, contrast on the counters, contrast, displays, the way the rulebook is written. Um, the rulebook is just written in an unconventional way. You're not used to it. It's not really a bad rulebook. Now a three mapper is, how do you line up three maps, right? There's very few, but not no games where the three maps are just lined up short end to short end. There's Victory Games 1809 is like that, but one of those three maps is not full sized, as I recall. Holland 44 is like that, but one of those maps is approximately half size. So that's one reason why that 4x6 is a good length, right? I mean, or a good size, I think, is 4 feet. You can reach the middle. It's not a huge problem. Um, longer than that, and it starts to become a problem unless you're Wilt Chamberlain, right? This is an interesting technique that I will mention. I would never put this on a card table. I despise card tables. I think they're super influencing. But putting this on a folding table, that's not a bad idea necessarily. You can usually get one of those plain doors relatively inexpensively. It's going to be a hollow core thing that's basically made. It's basically cardboard with a wood veneer on it. Okay. But you can stain it and make it look nice. And it's no different than this IKEA Linmon table, and sturdier than this because this thing's not wearing well, to be frank. But you can get a lot of. For years my desk was a door. I mean, it's been a while, but it was a door set on two filing cabinets. So you can always put a felt surface on your game table too. I don't particularly like a felt surface. I would rather have just a dead flat surface personally. So Nordic Maelstrom is dealing with a sinus headache, which is not cool. I got a migraine on Sunday. This is worth a shot. I do have the glare reducing plexi, and I don't think it reduces the glare that much. All my plexi needs a cleaning, to remove tape residue and old markers and that kind of stuff. And I just actually started that. That would be a good thing to do now-ish when there's no game on the big table. So I'll do a video showing you the table layout. There's basically a table against the wall to do filming stuff, a table sort of perpendicular to that I could play a game on, a one map game with a little overlap, and then the two tables in the middle that are like the big game table. And I could get the height doesn't work right. That's kind of the problem, but I could easily do a whiff on that, along with the 18-inch wide side table, because you do need some side table for whiff. And shit, that's possible because I really want to play whiff at some point. I mean, it's probably not the first thing on the list. I have seen these game toppers and they are nice, but I wouldn't want one that's like a lot bigger than the table it's sitting on, right? And that's basically all it is. It's a thing that sits on your existing table. Oh, yeah, fair enough. This is true. Also estate sales and stuff like that. Um, Big old ass dining tables can be really good war game tables. So I will make a note that if you buy these from Walmart, they'll be cheaper than they are anywhere else. I do have one of these. Yeah, and that's kind of a 24 by 36 shelf it's something you generally have to build. But you can totally do this. You just got to use extreme care in moving it around. That's all. So there you go, permanent war game space. That's what I want this to be right here. So um so I put that new shelf up, and that kind of led to reorganize. This was over the weekend, and that kind of led to reorganizing the whole space. Now, I also made some decisions about stuff that's going, and I found a local guy who wants to buy some magazines. I've got about 5 linear feet of old Dragon magazines that I really just don't need, and I would like to get rid of them, and he's offered to buy them, and I will be happy to sell them to him. So those migrated their way out. So this shelf down here that was full of magazines that you can't see is now empty. So I have a little bit of breathing room, right? At least for friggin' magazines. So I mean, it depends on the game, right? If it's a lot of old SPI games, everything's on the map, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you're playing, OCS tends to be relatively contained on the map, but frankly, that's because they leave stuff out until Third Winter, right? Or Hungarian Rhapsody, I should maybe say, when they started putting more displays in. Third Winter needs about another, it's a 4-map game, and it needs about another map's worth of space for displays to hold the production and all that stuff. Oh, I didn't know this, but I guess you could Steam it. Um, that would suck. Fuck, that would suck. No, if you just want like, I mean, if you don't have maybe, I mean, at the old place we didn't have a dining room table. There was no dining room, right? We sit on the couch. That was just the way it worked. Now we have a dining room table, so I could play something on that. Ping pong tables. I suspect that maybe that's a cheap ping pong table. I mean, I think they shouldn't do that, right? They shouldn't bow on their own. So Mark says for Storm of Steel, cut off the finish part of the map. It's about the same as Balance of Powers. I mean, so the map footprint between those two games is not identical, but it's similar in that there's 3 maps that don't line up in a perfect rectangle. And in the case of Storm of Steel, there's like a section of the border between Turkey and Russia that you kind of have to cut off of one map and stick it in that corner. And that's a little problematic. I mean, I think most people will be fine with this, but you can't leave it set up on a dining room table for 6 months, right? That's a different story. Late Shove says more Harn videos. More Harn videos will be coming along at some point. Christopher Smith says if he used the dining room table, his wife would gut him like a fish. Well, yeah, but if it ain't Sunday, that's what I'm saying, right? I mean, and I wouldn't want I would not want to hog a dining room table with a war game, right? Even if I didn't have 4 cats, where that was just flatly unviable. I would not want to do that personally. I would not want to do that, right? I'll get a folding table in a spare room or a basement or an attic or garage or whatever, right? So, but I mean, I wouldn't want to use the dining room table as a holding area for a game in progress for more than maybe overnight, and that would be it. Mandarin Mike's got to have it cleared out by Thanksgiving, which I think sounds like a splendid idea. So, I mean, that's kind of why I had, a prerequisite for a house was a space I could get, I could leave something set up, right? Now, I wasn't particularly picky about what that was going to look like. It could have been a basement, could have been an attic, could have been a room above a garage, whatever, could be a spare bedroom, whatever. I don't care. But I needed that extra space. So that was a thing I was looking at. And in this case, it ended up being the basement. Now, with the 4 cats, this is a consideration. So one of the things that I had to do, and I felt like this was working for a while, is I put this baby gate up. Now it's a taller than normal baby gate. So I put this, there's a doorway in there, and I was like, I could put a door in here, but it's not a standard door height. It's just about 6 feet tall, the opening. So I'd have to basically fabricate a door or modify a door that I bought. And it's like, this seems like a real pain. And I'd have to frame it in. And that seemed like a huge pain. So I got the baby gate, which was an economical solution. And for a while it worked. The cats have figured out that it is possible to bypass the baby gate. And I put like I like lined it with cardboard so they can't just go through the bars. Um, so that didn't. It's I might have to figure something else out. But right now they're not the ones that are getting in are not disturbing anything, and I have caught them sneaking in. Yeah, picking up the plexi sounds like a terrible idea. Okay, Robert Phillips has a friend that used four 4x2 Kallax shelving units, all four on those metal stands that you can buy, which our IKEA didn't have for months. Um, that will put it at a height of about 35 inches, and then as a ping pong table topper on top of those four Kallaxes. Four Kallaxes. Four Kallaxes. Four Kallaxes. Oh. This doesn't sound incredibly efficient to me. I mean, the 4x2 Kallaxes on the stands, that makes complete sense. But if I was going to do that, I would not use four of them. I would use two of them, use them for storage, and then build some kind of topper that goes on them so I could make as wide a situation as I wanted for that. Eric Goebel, thanks so much for the support. It is much appreciated. Where does my game fit? It's going to be more on the big side. It's definitely going to take more than 20 hours to play. I and space wise, it's I will see, but I mean it's four maps plus displays, so it's going to be a decent amount of footprint. So, and we'll see. I've got other inspirations going on now. I don't really want to have multiple game projects going on in parallel, but that may end up being what ends up happening. Because it's not we had a show on this, and I think we got less great ideas in that show than we've had tonight, actually. Like that, like the uh Robert Phillips, this is I think a really interesting idea, actually. Lord knows I got enough freaking Kallaxes sitting around. So now, I mean, it's pretty easy to. So imagine, if you will, two standard sized folding tables at 2.5 by 6 feet. Okay, you put them, spread them out so they're 7 feet apart. All right, and then you go get a 4x8 sheet of plywood and four 2x4s, and you frame out, get your 4x8 sheet of plywood, and then screw in the screw it all together so that it's framed. And then you can spread that across your two folding tables, and that'll give you about an extra 2 feet of folding table for displays or whatever, and a 4x8 playing surface, which I think we can all agree is a big playing surface. And it was this that I was thinking about, and then I thought, well, I might as well just put legs on it if I'm going to do that, and then put the folding tables away and use them for when unwanted guests come over. So, I mean, for the card table, if it's just hey, we're gonna sit down and play Red Flag over Paris, cool. But anything that's gonna sit around, I don't try. I've got a couple of card tables. Would you like some? And I just don't need them. But for holding stuff, oh god, I wouldn't want to put drinks on them, especially, man. I don't trust that. We've had, you've heard the horror story about somebody dumping a big gulp on the copy of Case Blue. So that person was never seen again. So, Mark, we are on exactly the same wavelength here. Drinks go on the floor. I'd rather them not be on the floor, but I'm not going to scream at anybody about that. I'd rather them go on another table entirely. By all means, stay hydrated, but keep your shit away from my valuable games. Um, I mean, this is germane though, right? I mean, how big your table is will determine how big you can fit a game. Now, there's something to be said about having a bunch of table space and having 3 or 4 things set up at the same time, right? And very few people, not nobody, because I know somebody, but very few people have the space to set up multiple monsters at a time. But I mean, just like last weekend, I had 3 games set up in there. Um, so drinks on the floor is accident prone, but it's easy to clean up too. So I mean, this is I'd be really concerned about leaning on these things though. I mean, maybe you just don't lean on them and that's fine. Um, but oh, so you're not saying I sort of pictured card table in my head. Maybe this is not a card table, in which case I think you might be fine. So Brent McCabe says, keep it on the floor, have to feed the dogs and cats, keep them occupied and away from the game table. Yeah, there you go. So oh dear. Oh dear. You are fired. So the yummy. The so I mean Mo says that tabletoppers need to be secured to make them safer to use. Yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mean, you could duct tape the fucker down if you need to, but you can get some form of clamps or bungee cords or whatever and figure it out, right? So you can secure those. So I think what Perfidious Albion means by folding banquet tables is in fact what I mean when I say folding tables, which are pretty much the 2.5 by 6 foot folding tables that they have at Costco. So Jason W says, instead of number of maps, what if we measure by counter sheets? I think the right answer is to measure by time, right? Um, I'm trying to remember if it was the Conquerors that I'm thinking of or not. Well, it's really not a huge game, but nevertheless has a lot of counters. Um, it wasn't the Conquerors. It was something else that came up relatively recently. Ugh, 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 ugh. I mean, yeah, this bad news, right? Don't want this at all. So language. Okay, Captain America, sure thing. Use 2 by 2s as stringers that hold the toppers against the table edge. This would work. This would work. Just get spacers or something like that. Um, in a way, I would. This is fair. I think this is a fair comparison. But if it's play on Vassal or don't play, I mean, I think it's you're shooting yourself in the face if you decide you'd rather not play than play on Vassal, right? If that's the option you got based on whatever limitations you're operating under, well, then play on Vassal, right? I have said many times that I like the tactility of wargaming. And that remains true, but at the same time, if when I Whiff is a terrible example in a lot of ways because I can't wear this friggin' hat anymore. Because it's a game that it just requires a lot of management of chits and cups and pools and stuff like that. And same thing with European Universalis, by the way. And I don't necessarily think that that's really easy to deal with in Vassal or Tabletop Simulator. I mean, Mo, this is basically the dream right here. I think you could finish for the people in a long day, maybe over 2 days. Um, I would never really play. I mean, I could see starting in 1862, but I probably never play for the people or U.S. Civil War without wanting to play basically the whole war out. So, Brent McCabe, F&E is probably Federation and Empire. Ah, a very interesting factoid. Marty says that, God damn it. Marty says that for the people at WBC, budget 7 hours per game. That's pretty tight. Do they play the full campaign? I think if you know what you're doing, and if you're playing in a WBC tournament, you probably know what you're doing. I think that is probably sufficient. Stigler says that his GBACW modules can cut counter clutter by at least half. You never know. So that's a factor too, right? I mean, that this is fair to say that you don't have to deal with the problems of tactility when playing with Vassal. You don't have to worry about knocking stacks over. There are other problems where you could drag, things away, or there can be lag and things like that. Those are factors. I think Stigler does not play with physical pieces, and I guess that's fine. There are some people who really prefer to keep their physical copies pristine and just play with the electronic stuff. And generally, if I'm playing on Vassal, I will prefer to use the electronic rules. But I also have like a monitor that's so wide you can't see my hands when it's pulled to the side of the monitor. So this is a Samsung ultra wide, like a 72-inch. That's not right, but it's big. So it's a big ultra wide 2K monitor. So you could do this. You could totally do this. I prefer to play face to face, right? Because there is a social element, but at the same time, I also like to immerse too. And Vassal gives you the opportunity to do that without necessarily having the other person that's sitting there tapping their foot. It's a frustrating experience to play a war game face to face with a person who does not play at the same pace that you do. If you want to be, and this works both ways, if you want to be very slow and deliberative, and the other person wants to move, and just get it done, then one of you, man, probably both, are going to be frustrated. You're going to be frustrated because you think the other guy is not taking you the game seriously. And on the other hand, we got the other person sitting there tapping their foot because they're waiting for you to finish moving. Vassal, if you're playing by email, eliminates that problem. Just let me know, send me the turn when you got it done, right? Vassal does not require a massive graphics card, but you're better off having a decent amount of RAM. I will tell you that. 72-inch monitor. I mean, that's a freaking huge monitor. So I don't think it's 72 inches though. It's like just eyeballing it. It feels more like 55 inches, something like that. And I've got a 4070 graphics card, and I have had no issues, but I wasn't playing Starfield at full res either because it doesn't support ultra wide monitor. Thank you, Bethesda, for showing pictures at an event of ultra wide monitors playing the game. I mean, is there a mod? Yes, but I didn't want to deal with that. I strongly suggest if anybody is buying a machine nowadays, get 32 gigs of RAM. Strongly suggest. 16 is really light for Windows 10 or Windows 11. Yeah, it's this. We're talking about the same monitor. I forget the exact make of this thing, but it's a Samsung. I forget the model number. And I'm very happy with the monitor too. I mean, remember, this monitor was too much for my previous computer, so and it makes a big difference. So I've recommended this before. If you are experiencing sort of that confinement feeling while playing on Vassal, and you can spend the money, go buy like a 35 or 38 or whatever inch 4K or 2K TV and use that as your monitor. You will get great 49 inches. That sounds approximately correct, Alistair Logie. And it is the big curve one. It's about, I'd say 14 inches, 15 inches high as well, something like that. The 32 gigs is sufficient. Most applications won't support more than that anyway. So, but I'd want 32 at this point, just to give you the breathing room, the headroom. Black Friday, yeah. I mean, so I gave away a couple of the extra televisions. I've got a 35-inch 1080 TV in the game room that's intended to be used for with a DVD player hooked up to it. So that's intended to be used to play ancient DVDs. And I have so the idea is to replicate the Winterfest experience, right? And have war games happen in and have a war movie on the TV, right? And I think the only war movie I still have is I could figure something out if I wanted to hook it up to the internet, but it's not a smart TV, so I'd have to get a device to do that. Is I think a bridge too far, but that's okay. I'm happy to just keep a bridge too far playing on repeat at all times, no problem. And that's the thing is a comparably sized PC monitor will be substantially more expensive. There are reasons for that, but if you are not playing video games on it, then you don't care about this extra specs that the computer monitor at that size will give you. The TV is going to be perfectly adequate. So, and it'll make a big difference. I mean, if you got a big TV, I think I had a 42-inch 4K that I was using for Vassel, and it was like, oh wow, this makes a huge difference. And that's a case where I could play a big game and zoom out just a little bit and see the whole map. It's really nice. And it's that's a great scene. There's a lot of great scenes in that movie. There's a lot of great scenes in that movie. I mean, I love Edward Fox as what's his name? Um as Horrocks. That's a great scene. The thing with James Caan and the doctor, that's a great scene. The bridge at Nijmegen, I think, is a great scene. There's a lot of great scenes in that. The drops are really cool. They did it with like actual people with parachutes, right? So obviously I will watch the Napoleon movie. Okay. However, I am reminded of a couple of things. One, Ridley Scott done a number of historical movies that have been good movies, but bullshit historically. Gladiator is the obvious example. So all right, don't consider this an announcement, but there will be announcements before the end of the year. We are on the timetable. We are on schedule. There's some meetings happening that I don't want to make an announcement about yet, but there will be there will be an announcement after the meeting with some announcements. So you'll start seeing a couple of announcements, maybe November, but definitely December, and the process will be in full swing in January. That'll be the plan. So, um, yeah, GPU can't. The graphics card can be a huge investment. So, back to Ridley Scott and Napoleon. So, I love Gladiator. I think Gladiator is a fantastic movie. I think Braveheart's a very good movie, but historically, they're both bullshit. So, it's my concern that that's what we will get with the Napoleon movie as well. To what extent that'll be a problem, I don't know. I have also thought that at least one Ridley Scott movie was an absolutely irredeemable turd. That was Prometheus. I think it's a shit movie, written from shit material that they had a bunch of shit writers go in and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until nobody had any idea what movie they were making. So this is more like a 3.5 hour movie, is it not? I could be wrong about the exact runtime, but it's at least in the neighborhood of 3 hours. I tend to like Ridley Scott's movies too, but Ridley Scott rises to the level of the material that he has to work with. When he has really good material to work with, he will produce something really awesome. When he has not good material to work with, he'll produce something that looks nice, but which is garbage, like Prometheus. So I know there are people that like Prometheus. Good for them. I think it is an absolute turd of a movie. Uh, this is not an inaccurate statement. It's still a great movie, though that does not make it not a great movie. But this is the same phenomenon. It is not a great history movie. Kingdom of Heaven, not a great history movie. And as long as you watch so I think we've talked about this recently. The The theatrical cut of Kingdom of Heaven is not worth your time. The extended cut is. The That is a film that was absolutely butchered by editors, and it is absolutely it is completely disjointed if you watch that theatrical release. It actually flows much more naturally if you watch the theatrical version. Now, I will say that I do find the reuse of the Jerry Goldsmith theme music for the 13th Warrior to be super duper cheesy, but at least it's great music, so there's that. There are historically dubious things in there, but there's also, and Orlando Bloom is fine. Um, Edward Norton is really good as Baldwin. Eva Green is really good. Jeremy Irons is really good. Liam Neeson's good, but he's always good. He's not in the movie that much. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's not very good. That's not very good. The I don't remember the guy's name. The actor that played Saladin. Boy, was that guy awesome. Wow, was that guy awesome. And Alexander Siddig from Deep Space Nine is in the movie as well. You may or may not have recognized. U-Boat is being re-released. That's great. Congratulations to U-Boat for what U-Boat did. But it will not be eligible this year. Well, I mean, I'm perfectly happy to give you the caveat that it's a great movie. It's a shitty history lesson, but maybe if you're totally dependent on if one is totally dependent on getting one's history from movies, then it's a problem. But neither Mo nor I have this issue, so I'm not particularly. I have not seen The Duelist. I really want to. It is, I think, on streaming somewhere. I've seen clips of it, and it's like, this looks pretty good. This was funny though, wasn't it? It's like, what? What? What is happening here with the tailgates on the boats and everything? This is possible that it's a no, I don't think this is the problem in the case of Prometheus. What I think it is they had a different movie that they then combined into one screenplay with an Alien prequel, and so it's completely disjointed and doesn't um it just doesn't all hang together. It was one of the few movies where I was actually insulted by its stupidity in the first, say, half an hour. And it's got a terrific cast too. I wanted this is I was a hugely into the Crusades I still am to some extent, but I'm not really wargaming that much in this space right now. I was hugely into the Crusades at the time, so I knew a decent amount about the history, and it's great. It's great history. There's some really cool stuff in there, and it's not a maddeningly ahistorically. There's some issues, but it's not as ahistorical as Gladiator. Let me put it that way. Yeah, get the director's cut. The director's cut is excellent. The theatrical cut is not worth your time. I basically agree. Oh, very good. Mike Welker is drinking the Lagavulin. I would be, well, probably not, because, well, I had Lagavulin and I drank it. So it's really good. It's one of my favorites. Full length film, I believe that's true. Prometheus it's a good looking movie, right? I haven't seen Alien Covenant, but I have no reason to have a problem with that. There are historicity concerns with Black Hawk Down that I am aware of, and I'm not qualified to comment on since I've not done that research. I know there's some issues that have been raised. It is a great movie, however. Charles Latour, thanks for stopping by. History of the World Part 1 is exactly as accurate as it needed to be. Robin Hood is a legendary character, let's say, anyway. So, have you ever seen the original Dungeons and Dragons movie? Holy shit. Jeremy Irons is in that, and you can tell that Jeremy Irons knows exactly what kind of shitty movie he has just signed up for. So I wouldn't say he's bad in it. It's a bad movie. I'm not talking about the recent one. The recent one's actually very enjoyable. I'm talking about the original one with one of the Wayans brothers and Thora Birch and Jeremy Irons and nobody else. That's true. He has been somewhat typecast, but fortunately, he's been typecast in type that every movie needs. So, I mean, so I understand when I'm saying this, I'm preaching to people who know this already. That a historical movie is going to take liberties with history. We just know that, and it's fine. It's not necessarily it even a bad reflection on the movie. Uh, Ghassan Massoud was the fellow who played Saladin in Kingdom of Heaven, and fuck, he was awesome. Wow, um, what a great movie. Um, what a great performance. Again, the director's cut. That's a good movie. It's got. I think it's less good of a movie than it could have been. It's like a perfect wargamer movie because it pays a lot of attention to the battle. And it's got a great performance by Steiger and a good performance by Christopher Plummer and absolute nobodies everywhere else. The only other memorable thing that is really in the movie is Blucher when he's like, "Raise the black flag, my children," which is not the right accent, but um yeah, like I said, there's issues with Black Hawk Down, but it's a great movie. I like Alien. Yeah, okay. I like Aliens 3. I think Aliens 3 is an underrated movie. That's another movie that was wrecked by um in the editing room, actually. This is fair. Yeah, everything's on Prime for a price. That's kind of the problem. Get off the beach. Or they needed somebody playing bagpipes. That's what they really needed. I mean, the whole concept. So this is actually why I didn't actually finish watching it. I was offended by by its abject stupidity. Um, and it's got a terrific cast. It's got what's his name and what's her name are both in it, and they're very good. Deadwood is fantastic. I was a huge fan of Ted Wood, but but I think I missed the last season and then the movie that they released. I probably should catch up on that, but I'll do that once I sign back up for HBO whenever that happens. The Balin of Ibelin is an actual guy. I mean, the whole he's some pauper blacksmith. That's fictional, but he's an actual guy. So it's I've heard that one of the direct to video sequels was actually decent, but I forget which one. This is, ugh. I'll tell you what. So I have no opinion on this product, okay, other than to observe that it is a fabulous, fabulous name. Another glorious day in the core. That's a great name, a great title, man. So if it's a disappointment, that's exceptionally disappointing. Honor Among Thieves was was, was fun. That's the new one with Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. Syrian, actually. No, he's right. My Henry Mike's right about this. Not did I say Iranian? I think I said Iranian. He's Syrian, I remember. I've looked the guy up because I'm like, who is this dude? I want to see more of this guy. Dunkirk was good. We often digress into war movies at the end of these. I liked Dunkirk. It's an interesting type of movie. If you just kind of think of it as kind of an atmosphere piece, I think it actually holds up better. Uh, that may have been, that may have been my terrible Monty Python accent. Good catch on this Mosul. Good catch on that. I might have to check that out. Al Swearingen was one of the great TV characters in my opinion, and I was watching half the time to watch Al. I keep hearing about The Wire, and it starts off very slowly. So All right. So, what about the Sharp series? I've seen clips, but I haven't seen like a whole season. Yeah, I should watch this. Right. Eric Goebel, thanks for stopping by. Jeff Beeler is running another glorious day at the core at UConn in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Timothy Oliphant's really good in that too. I think he's much better in that than he was in Justified. I will get to the wire at some point. There's some good Wellington lines in Waterloo, to be fair. I think the big letdown for me in that film is actually the score. I think the score is very weak. I don't know. I mean, I didn't doze off once during Dunkirk. For example, the Thin Red Line had many dozable moments. Everybody agrees that The Wire is awesome. And that's what made Idris Elba famous too. So I just got to get to it, right? Generation Kill is something that I want to see. Yeah, that's kind of the way it reads. Actually, everybody's great in Deadwood though. Brad Dourif was great in Deadwood. What's his name? Piss. William Sanderson is fantastic in Deadwood. I mean, everybody that was in Deadwood was fantastic. All right, folks. So we are packing it in for the evening. We will be nothing tomorrow, but we will have a video on Wednesday, which is the latest Wargames Unearthed. In this case, it's about Russian campaign. Probably going roughly 2 weeks later for the third one, which will be Frederick the Great. And hopefully by then, friggin' War Between the States will be here and I can get that scheduled as well. So, and then on Thursday, we'll be back with Dan. I don't know who the guest is going to be yet. We might have somebody, we might not, for this week. And if Dan doesn't have somebody, then I'll get somebody. We'll figure it out. So, otherwise, and there should be, I think I said this already, there should be an unboxing on Thursday at the usual unboxing time. So I want to thank everybody for stopping by tonight. If you want to help support the show, you have already done so by being here. So thank you. Thanks for everybody who participated in the conversation. If you haven't already, thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, links to the Patreon and all that in the notes below. We'll be back next week with more show. Until then, everybody have a great rest of the week.